tried to steal my parking spot. Immediately regretted it. My assigned parking spot. It wasn't glamorous, just a rectangle of asphalt in the sprawling Innotech Solutions parking garage, a decent distance from the entrance. But it was mine. And, thanks to my dodgy knee, a necessity. The company doctor had signed off on it, HR had processed the paperwork, and for the last year, it had been a small, consistent perk in an otherwise chaotic corporate landscape. I was pulling into the garage on a Tuesday morning, running slightly late after a particularly brutal physical therapy appointment, when I saw it. A monster. A black-on-black Cadillac Escalade, taking up not just my spot, but encroaching significantly into the adjacent one. The license plate read, Harding. Great. I circled the garage, my knee throbbing with each revolution, before finally finding a spot on the far side, practically in another zip code. By the time I reached my desk, I was already simmering. Sarah, my work wife and resident sanity checker, saw my face and raised an eyebrow. Rough morning? You have no idea, I said, collapsing into my chair. I recounted the parking debacle, ending with, I swear, that Escalade looked like it could swallow my entire Corolla whole. Sarah grimaced. Harding? As in Chad Harding, VP of Sales Harding, the guy who thinks he's God's gift to Innotech. The one and only, I confirmed. I tried to let it go, figuring it was a one-time thing. Maybe he was genuinely in a rush, although the way he'd straddled the lines suggested less urgency and more blatant disregard. I sent an email to building security, just to lodge a complaint. The response was underwhelming. We've noted the incident. Please let us know if it happens again. Noted. Like it was a bird sighting. The next day, the Escalade was back. Same spot, same arrogant disregard for the painted lines. This time, I decided to confront him. I waited by his car until he sauntered out of the building, phone glued to his ear, suit impeccably tailored. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine ad for executive success. Excuse me, Mr. Harding, I said, trying to keep my voice level. He glanced at me, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. He didn't bother to stop his phone conversation. Yeah? This is my assigned parking spot, I said, gesturing to the space. I have a permit due to a medical condition. He finally pulled the phone away from his ear but didn't hang up. Look, I was running late. I'll move it later. He started to walk away. Later? I repeated, incredulous. I had to park halfway across the lot. And this isn't the first time. He stopped again, turning to face me fully. His expression was a masterclass in condescension. Seriously? You're making a fuss about a parking spot? Get over it. There are plenty of others, he smirked. Maybe you need to get here earlier. Then he resumed his phone call and climbed into his gas-guzzling chariot, leaving me standing there, fuming. That was it. That was the turning point. It wasn't just the parking spot anymore. It was the arrogance, the entitlement, the complete lack of respect. It was the feeling of being dismissed, of being less than. I went to HR. Big mistake. After a week of phone tag and bureaucratic tap dancing, I finally got a meeting with Ms. Mage Davies, a woman whose entire personality seemed to be constructed from corporate jargon. We understand your concern, Alex, she said, her voice carefully neutral. But Mr. Harding is a valuable asset to the company. We need to be mindful of his needs. My need is a parking spot that I was medically approved for, I countered, struggling to maintain composure. It's not about convenience. It's about my health. She gave me a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. We appreciate your understanding, Alex. We'll look into it. I left her office feeling defeated. Chad Harding was untouchable. So, Sarah said as we ate lunch in the cafeteria, what's the verdict? I sighed. Nothing. HR is useless. Apparently, Chad's needs outweigh mine. Sarah slammed her fork down. That's ridiculous. You can't let him get away with this. What am I supposed to do? I asked, feeling helpless. He's a VP. I'm just a code monkey. Don't underestimate yourself, Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with a mischievous spark. You're not just a code monkey. You're a ninja code monkey. Use your skills. That's when the idea started to form. A plan. Not a grand, theatrical revenge scheme, but something subtle, something elegant. something that would make Chad Harding regret the day he decided to steal my parking spot. My first step was information gathering. I started paying closer attention to Chad's habits, how he used his company laptop, his reliance on the sales software, the way he barked orders at his junior associates. I learned he was completely dependent on technology. He couldn't even seem to print a document without calling IT. That's where Mark Olson came in. Mark was the head of IT, a quiet, unassuming guy who was brilliant with computers but socially awkward. We occasionally chatted in the break room, and I knew he wasn't a fan of Chad's overbearing personality. One afternoon, I caught him by the coffee machine. "Hey Mark, got a sec?" He looked flustered. Sure Alex, what's up?" I laid out my plan, carefully omitting the specific details of my grievances. I focused on the security vulnerabilities I had identified in Chad's use of company systems, framing it as a matter of protecting InnoTech's data. Mark's eyes widened as I spoke. "Wow, I hadn't really considered that," he said, scratching his chin. "You're right, there are some serious issues there. The VP of Sales really needs to update his security protocols." He was in. Not necessarily complicit, but willing to look the other way while I tested the system's defenses. The first phase of my plan was subtle. I knew Chad relied heavily on sales reports to justify his budget and demonstrate his team's performance. So I started tweaking the numbers, just a little bit. A slight downward trend in key metrics, a minor discrepancy in revenue projections. Nothing that would raise immediate alarm, but enough to plant a seed of doubt in the minds of his superiors. I knew Chad had a penchant for taking credit for everyone's work, a habit I was keen to exploit. Next, I moved on to the company's internal communication system. I knew Chad used it constantly to send emails, schedule meetings, and coordinate with his team. I also knew he had a terrible habit of leaving his computer unlocked when he stepped away from his desk. One morning, during a crucial sales presentation to a major client, I struck. While Chad was in the middle of his pitch, a series of bizarre messages started appearing in the company-wide chat room, all supposedly coming from his account. "OMG, I think I left my hairpiece at the gym. Anyone seen it? Just spilled coffee all over my new Armani suit. Send help. Is it Friday yet? I need a margarita and a beach vacation, ASAP." The chat room erupted in chaos. People were posting laughing emojis, asking if Chad had been hacked, and generally making a mockery of the situation. I watched from my cubicle, a small smile playing on my lips. The presentation, as I later learned from David Miller, a junior sales associate, was a disaster. Chad was flustered, distracted, and unable to regain control of the room. The client, understandably, was not impressed. Phase 3 involved Chad's access to key sales tools. Using my knowledge of the company's IT infrastructure gleaned, of course, from identifying potential security vulnerabilities, I was able to temporarily disable his access to these tools at critical moments. During a product demo, the system crashed. During a crucial negotiation, he couldn't access the relevant data. Each mishap further eroded his credibility and undermined his authority. The final piece of the puzzle was the parking spot. This one was Sarah's idea. "You need to make it personal," she said. "Something that really gets under his skin." I remembered a particularly annoying ringtone I had heard on a YouTube video a few weeks prior, Yakety Sax, the theme song from The Benny Hill Show. Using a combination of GPS tracking, access through the InnoTech security cameras, and some clever coding, I created a system that would automatically play the ringtone at full volume on Chad's phone every time his Escalade parked in my spot. The volume control was also disabled remotely by me. The first time it happened, I nearly choked on my coffee. I saw Chad storming out of the building, his face red with rage, fumbling with his phone. He looked like he wanted to throw it against the wall. The ringtone continued to blare until he finally drove his monstrous vehicle away. The effect was immediate. Chad became increasingly paranoid, convinced that someone was out to get him. He started accusing people of sabotage, demanding investigations, and generally making a fool of himself. His superiors, already concerned about his declining performance and questionable ethics, the overspending on his sales budget had finally come to light, started to lose patience. The hammer finally fell a few weeks later. I heard through the grapevine Brenda, the receptionist, knows everything that Chad had been called into a meeting with the CEO and CFO. He emerged an hour later, looking pale and defeated. The official announcement came the next day. Chad Harding was taking a leave of absence to pursue other opportunities. In other words, he was fired. The atmosphere in the office was electric. People were whispering, gossiping, and generally celebrating the downfall of the arrogant VP of sales. I never revealed my involvement in Chad's demise. I let people assume that it was the result of his own incompetence and ethical failings, which, to be fair, was partially true. Mark covered my tracks, blaming the IT mishaps on a system glitch. The embarrassing messages were attributed to a hacking attempt. And the ringtone? Well, that remained a mystery. The best part? I could finally park in my designated spot without any fear of retribution. A few weeks after Chad's departure, I was walking into the office, a cup of coffee in my hand, when I saw David Miller, the junior sales associate, approach me. "Hey, Alex," he said, his voice low. "Just wanted to say, thanks." I raised an eyebrow. "Thanks? For what?" He shrugged. "For everything. Things are a lot better around here now." He paused, then added with a wink. "And, tell Mark he's a genius with those system glitches." I smiled. "I will." Later that day, Sarah and I went out for lunch. "So," she said, grinning, "justice served?" I took a sip of my iced tea. "Absolutely." As I drove home that evening, I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. I hadn't sought out revenge. I had simply defended what was rightfully mine. And in the process, I had rid Innovatech Solutions of a particularly obnoxious example of corporate entitlement. Sometimes, the best revenge is the kind you never have to admit to.